As has entered my mind many times before, today we're going to be talking about writing. Writing, I think, is something often not talked about because it's such a common thing, but in some cases, there's a right and there's a wrong way to do it. You can write for yourself, you can write for others, you can write for God. And there's a healthy way to do all of these. All of them can be good. But I encourage you to think about who and what you're writing for when you start writing. Because it can be valuable to write about someone you know or care about, to try and figure out your emotions around them and to figure out how best to proceed in your relationship with that person, friendship or otherwise. But so too can you become infatuated with someone and begin to write about them and make everything you write about them thinking that this will somehow gain you popularity with them in some sense. This in itself is somewhat of a fallacy. When you start to write, and I mean really write, when you enter flow state, it comes from the soul, inherently. There's no other way. And so it must also be said that writing needs to come from a good state of mind, not necessarily free from evil, because all of us go through time periods where we are more influenced by evil. But it must be a mind state that has reasonable expectations. If you start writing, think you're going to write a whole book in one day. Or maybe it's not even the word count. Maybe you expect that you can just sit down at any time and write something meaningful. You'll be disappointed. And it's very easy to think that these failings are a reflection of your own character. When you sit down to write and nothing comes out, or what does come out has little to no meaning to you or even to anyone else. But it's important to recognize that as humans, we are unstable creatures. We can design chairs with 4 legs, so it does not tip. But if you were to design it with just one leg, one point to balance upon, then you would not be successful, because someone would sit down and the chair would immediately fall. Because a machine tips back and forth, but with nothing to right it, it will soon fall one way or the other. But humans are different in that behavior, in that we are constantly in this state. I think a good analogy is our bodies themselves, our legs as we walk. There's nothing to stop us from falling forward or backwards. We're really only stabilized in this direction and this direction. It is our muscles that keep us steady. And so too with writing. As with anything, it's a skill to practice. But I believe that everyone, to some extent, has it. And even if that writing only has meaning to you, you can write something meaningful. And it's not a matter of knowing the right words, it's not a matter of knowing fancy words, it's about writing what you care about. Sometimes it's very difficult, I find, to get out of the mindset of thinking about someone. If you just met someone, it can be easy to think about them a lot, and you start to write about them, and what you write, it becomes polluted because of that. When I started writing my first book, this is something I learned very quickly. I could not base it off of any one person, because people are temporary. It's not the case that everybody leaves, as 21 Pilots says in their song, I can't recall the name of it. But, nonetheless, relationships have no guarantee. Some people are here for a reason, to help us realize something or learn something about ourselves or the world. A season, just a time to benefit us, to make us realize something, can be anything, or a lifetime. But you never know until the very end. Who's going to stay? Who's going to go? And if you want to write a book, and you start writing it about one person, say you start writing it about your girlfriend, she leaves, you stop writing. It's not right. Writing is something that needs to come from the soul. And that's what makes it so good. This is why a machine, an artificial intelligence, can never hope to replicate us. Because we are special. It is our souls that make writing have any meaning or purpose. The very idea of fiction is an inherently human thing. To suspend disbelief. To think about things that do not exist. To imagine. That is inherent to who we are. I think it's a really special part of who we are. One that we should not soon forget. Yet when we write for another, it goes one of two ways. Perhaps we learn things, perhaps we improve, or perhaps that person leaves, and the writing project is discontinued. It's so important to think about who you're writing for when you start to write. Because it might be okay that you're writing for someone, but you need to make sure that that writing is positive, that it comes from your soul, that it cannot be influenced by something changing. And of course, as we've seen in the past, people wrote during war times. They wrote about the war because that's what people cared about. They were all worried about the war. And come the end of wartime, perhaps many people didn't want to hear about it anymore, and the books were relegated to history. But usually this is not the case. Usually, on a temporary scale, on a writing project that is relatively short term, the reason that it ends is because the thing that you based it upon was a fallacy. You thought that your girlfriend would stay forever. You thought that you'd have that job forever. You thought that you'd feel a certain way about something forever. I think the best writing transcends this. Something I found really great about writing my book is that I can just keep coming back to it. And I start writing and I know when it's right. Sometimes I'll wake up at 4 a.m. and just start writing. And I don't despair over the lost sleep because I know that it's right. Sometimes, very rarely, it's okay to prioritize the soul over sleeping. Because as humans, it is integral to who and what we are. As you keep writing, perhaps it's in a journal, perhaps you start writing your own book, things begin to become special. When it becomes something that you come back to. But how do you enter that state? Because I talk about this from the perspective of someone who's been in it, someone who's learned it over time. But I know this is not all. Perhaps it's not you. So what is flow state? Flow state is the describer for when you start writing and you're no longer logically thinking about what you're writing. It comes from a place deep inside you that no one really knows about, but is inherently human and inherently soulful. And it's difficult to get here because so much of what we write is intended to be read by another. A school project, a letter, a journal you plan to share with a friend. All of it. If you plan to share it, it can lose its meaning. And not to say that it has to, but flow state is when you stop caring about what you're writing. When the logic fades and all you're left with is what makes you inherently human. I'm a firm believer that our humanity, our soulfulness, go hand in hand with logic. Because the very premise of logic is our humanity. As we write, as we do anything for that matter, it's all from the premise of value for our lives. value for the lives of others. If it weren't for this, we would not write. What would be the point? For if human lives had no value, then we could let ourselves fall. We could let others fall. We could throw others off of cliffs. But it's not the case. Because we all care about one thing, and that is our humanity and our value. We mean something to the world. Our writing means something to the world. And that is something we should not let go of. So continue writing. Imagine what it is that you have in your mind. And just start. And I don't want you to do it for anyone. Try for once to write in your journal. Whether you have someone to think about or not, try not to. What comes out when you imagine what is exclusively yourself? What comes out when the pain is allowed to be there? When you're not worried how anyone would feel? When you have an emotion and you state it before even thinking about it? I believe this is how writing should be. And after a while of this, the words will begin to dance and to flow. It is a good thing. It is an inherently human thing. I do this a lot with my writing, and I find myself in that state. Yet I know so many people who fail to do so. I think school contributes to this a lot. Education is good in the sense that it teaches us logic, and it teaches us what the truth of the matter is. But sometimes, after so long of every single time we sit down to write, it being for a school project, and us not being able to express our humanity in a literal way, I think what we are begins to fade. The soul of your writing begins to fade. So if you have that, or if you don't, grab it and hold on to it, because it'll do you great good. Writing. Get a journal. Write in it every week, every 2 weeks. Doesn't matter, as long as you keep coming back to it. Keep seeing what your words do as you begin to open up. As you begin to realize what it feels like to write for no one but yourself. I hope you learned something from this video. I hope you start writing. Have a great day.